As Denise said, I'm Cosima. I'm 18 years old, and I've been working in a field called trust and safety since I was about 13 years old. I recently did my A levels in politics, economics, and geography, and I'm now waiting for my results. And I'm hoping to go to UCL in September to study politics and international relations, and like specializing in like supranational regulation, which is just like the UN and such. It's a fancy word for that. Firstly, thank you very much for having me to speak with you today. And please bear with me. I'm usually doing speeches on like behalf of the UK as opposed to like myself. So it's kind of weird to talk about myself. But anyway, um, this evening I'd like to speak to you about something called meaningful youth engagement, both in the context of my experience and also the importance of driving engagement to like achieve societal goals, such as like the UN 2030 agenda, which I've heard your group engages with. Um, so I mentioned that I worked in a field called trust and safety, and effectively what that is like online safety and the creation of like online platforms while they acknowledge like young people so that they have like privacy settings and are accountable to like the people that are actually using them rather than just working to make as much profit as they can and hurting people in the process. Um, it might be a bit confusing when I said that I started when I was 13. I know most people probably don't work in like the real world when they're young. So for some context, I'd like to start by letting you know about an organization called ChildNet. So ChildNet International are a children's charity, which works to promote internet safety among young people by providing resources and hosting national events, and also a platform called the Digital Leaders Program, which is something I first came across them through. So the Digital Leaders is like a youth activism platform, but it's operated through schools. So much like your club might have different like districts and areas, there's ChildNet digital leaders groups in lots of different schools around the UK, like state schools and also independent schools. It's kind of a mishmash of everyone. And in the platform, young people are signed up and then they complete training modules about internet safety. And then they will teach like their fellow classmates and people in their school about online safety and the digital world, things like AI. And it's constantly updated all of the time. And so there's this big platform and you can kind of log on and engage at like a school level through that. So I first started engaging with that in 2018 when I was, I think, 12. Um, when my school's computer science teacher opened the group, and we started by training and then um began giving sessions to the younger girls and also the older girls, which was terrifying. I was like 12 talking to 18-year-olds and they said it was good. I don't know if they were just being nice, but they said it was good. And then we went on to host these events for Safer Internet Day, which I'll kind of explain a bit later, but it's like a big internet safety charity day. And we would sell slime and cookies and things to raise money for ChildNet and Childline. Um, and so the following year, my teacher made me like the head of the group, which was pretty cool because I was like 13. I was like, yeah, that's street cred. And from that, I came across the opportunity to apply for a national version called the ChildNet Digital Champions. Um, and so um, I applied to this like board and had to do this big application and then be interviewed by their CEO. And I was equally terrified. And I had to use something called WebEx, which was like baby Zoom for the first time. And this was pre-COVID. So I was like, what is this? But anyway, seemingly I did okay. And so I was appointed in December of 2019. So since then, I've sat on the ChildNet Digital Champion board, working to create educational campaigns, in collaboration with civil society organizations, so Stonewall, Gallup, Brook, to kind of incorporate internet safety with their causes to try and educate young people, whether it be like LGBTQ rights online or relationships and healthy relationships, and kind of promoting that in a context of the online world. So the young people have the information they need to function properly online and stay safe. Um, I've also helped to develop the platforms that young people and everyone use. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, YouTube, those kinds of things to help make sure that all of the different components of their apps are safe for young people to use. Um, but also everybody, because a massive problem that I've come across in all the years I've been doing it is that platforms are really inaccessible to everyone, whether you're older or younger, because it's really hard when you first make an Instagram profile, it's automatically public. But what if you don't want everyone to see what you're posting? Or the settings to change things are hidden behind a bunch of different screens, and it's really hard. So I've worked with different platforms to try and improve that. Um, and then I've also worked on something called National Safer Internet Day. Um, so Safer Internet Day is kind of inaugural. If you no, I'm on the wrong thing. Yeah, would it be okay to go to the fourth slide? Oh, yeah, I think the one after that. And then one more after that. Yeah, perfect. So, Safer Internet Day is an inaugural event. It's like a national campaign organized by something called the UK Safer Internet Centre, which is made up of ChildNet, my organization, the IWF, which is the Internet Watch Foundation, and they work with things like sexual misconduct online, and then the Southwest like Grid for Learning. Um, and so those three organizations come together to host the UK's version of Safer Internet Day, but it's actually carried out across the entirety of the EU and North America and parts of like Hong Kong and things like that. So every year, it's usually the first Tuesday of February. Um, there's this big event all over the country across all different schools, and also within London, where schools will host like different activities and assemblies, and different members of industry and third sector, and young people come together, usually at the BT Tower, to discuss internet safety issues. And so since 2020, I've been involved with that because I joined in the December of 2019. Um, and actually, I first came across Safer Internet Day about 2 weeks after I joined ChildNet, when I was sent to Parliament to explain to almost 300 MPs the importance of Safer Internet Day, to which I wasn't completely aware of what it was at the time, but I kind of winged it, and explained to them the theme that year, which was Together for a Better Internet, in light of a white paper which had been introduced into Parliament called the Online Harms Act or Bill at the time. Um, since then, I've been involved with 4 further Safer Internet Day campaigns, working to create promo campaigns with the BBC to educate children, um, and then resources, so quizzes and information packs for young people, which have gained, I think now maybe 25 million views, something like that. As well as like public and political relations. So the year before last, I was interviewing ministers about the Online Safety Act just before it passed, and also things like press with Sky News and Good Morning Britain, about what Safer Internet Day is, to try and raise awareness and get young people engaged, but also industry, because they're the ones that can kind of do something about it. Um, I've done lots of other work with ChildNet, kind of in the private and government sectors, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So if you could skip to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So something I'm really passionate about is meaningful youth engagement. And It's actually kind of a term coined by the UN. I mean, it's like a regular word, but they like to use that terminology to kind of discuss getting young people engaged with civil and like societal issues, whether it be the Sustainable Development Goals, namely like poverty and inequality and women's rights, and getting young people engaged and caring about and advocating for these issues. Um, and as you might have seen from what I talked about already, I'm really passionate about kind of getting young people involved in big societal issues because I've kind of done it myself a bit. And so, um, something I'm really passionate about is kind of getting other young people to start doing that because I think youth voice can be really, really powerful. Because if you think about it, young people are about 20% of the population kind of globally, but they're 100% of kind of the future population years to come. And so it can be really powerful when young people stand up and advocate for themselves and the rest of society on a manner of different issues. And so um, meaningful youth engagement is something quite close to my heart. Um, I think something really important is that sort of time and time again, when I've been talking to big private sector companies like Meta and YouTube, who make billions and billions of dollars a year, is that whilst they might not particularly want to listen to, say, the government at times, because it sounds restrictive to them, despite intentions, they really like to listen to young people because they're their kind of key consumers um in terms of getting other people into everything. And so I think when we get young people to really speak up, whether it be online or in person in protest, as long as it's safe, it can be really powerful. So yeah, that's like kind of why I'm passionate about it. If you click, I think, on the screen, it might let you play that video with the man.
Modern we heard about education, we've heard about safety in the use of the internet, much else. I think this illustrates just how important youth activism is, and by the same token, the inputs, the engagement of young people in the work of the United Nations, be it on delivering the 2030 agenda and the SDGs or other things. We absolutely need to benefit from everything that you do and can contribute to these all important processes.
I can send out the video after, but effectively, this guy is called literally Guy Ryder, and he's the former director of the International Labour Organization. And something he and I worked together on is something called Torchbearers for the SDGs, which is about getting people of all ages involved in promoting and advocating for sustainable development at all kinds of levels. And what he talks about is that having such a breadth of like informers at even UN processes, which are often quite, as like a young person would say, like gate kept, is really important and really effective. Um, you can also see on like that same slide, I think, yeah, that one. Some comments I received on a report. So last year, when the Online Safety Act passed, I was commissioned by Ofcom to create a report on the status of youth protection by all the big major social media platforms. And I mean, they were told my name, but this was kind of just general. I mean, I don't like to like toot my own horn or anything, but you can see from here that they found it really valuable to hear from someone outside of their own company and outside of the government on the status of everything. Because in my report, I talked about how things were inaccessible, no matter your age or occupation, that it was really hard to protect your kids if you are a parent because you can't see what they're doing. And so all of these comments were given to the different companies that I talked about, and they thought it was, yeah, apparently good. And so a couple months later, we started to see some really significant changes on platforms. So there was the introduction of supervision mode, which is a feature of Instagram where parents can sync their pages to their children's and they can see their messages, their search history, and their posts and everything to make sure that they're safe. But you can kind of tailor it to how much of your privacy you kind of want to give over. But it's a really key tool in protecting young people, especially sort of the 13-year-olds present. Um, and so you can kind of, yeah, see the importance and the power of youth engagement through that. Um, in my kind of time as a digital champion as a whole, I've consulted directly with the likes of Meta, Snap, etc. on a variety of their features, giving feedback on like, yeah, privacy, direct messages, misinformation, to kind of drive that greater transparency on their platforms, which is so often hard to use and convoluted and often kind of lying because they allow really heavily edited content without any kind of disclosure that it's been edited at all. Um, but excitingly, along with kind of supervision mode, we've seen a massive flurry of features come in the kind of past 6 months, year or so, including flagging, AI, modified, edited content. So it now tells people on Instagram if a picture has been photoshopped, so that if they're a young person looking at a body that's been kind of altered digitally and thinking that that's what they have to achieve, they now know that it's fake, which is really, I think, important. Um, and also content that's sort of to do with politics or global events and disasters. If content is now not correct or like fact checked through like a second and third source, it gets flagged as misinformation and blurred out. So now if people are resharing things all the time, um, massive amounts of misinformation aren't spread everywhere, which is really good. Um, this sort of demonstrates, as I said, the gravity of meaningful youth engagement in the private sector. And in my opinion, the sort of potential for change to be affected through similar means in like the third sector and governmental sort of organizations. Um, However, as I sort of, in the speech that this man was responding to, I sort of outlined that meaningful youth engagement, it can't occur if young people don't have access to the information that they are trying to advocate for. So if you think about the causes that you yourselves are passionate about, it might be women's rights or female health or global poverty, etc. Would you be passionate about them if you didn't know the depth and the breadth of the issue at hand? Likely not, at least not to the same extent that you are, because unless we are empowered with the information to form an opinion upon, it's really hard to advocate for them passionately. Um, as a result, I personally, along with like various colleagues, have made it a key mission to work to close information gaps, especially among young people, but among everyone really, on matters such as the SDGs, and also kind of wider issues. I've worked personally on closing information gaps in pediatric healthcare, as well as body image and mental health, because when young people have the information, they can form an opinion and then act upon them, be it at kind of like a massive UN scale or something like I have kind of come to, or anyway, whether like on social media or in person or talking to their friends. Everything can really make a difference, but it's really hard to do that without the information to kind of be passionate about. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the idea of meaningful youth engagement. If you could go on to the next slide, that would be great.
Of modern slavery.
Okay. So yeah, the next thing I'd like to touch on is the matter of regulation in the online world. Um, a large portion of my work over the years has been really focused on online engagement. In 2020, as I mentioned, a white paper, or like bill proposal, in case you're not familiar with like the parliamentary system, was proposed called the Online Harms Act. which was entered to sort of support online safety in the context of like the democratic values of the UK, such as freedom of speech and things. Naturally, you can imagine that if you design an act to ensure the safety of one group, you often have the potential of infringing upon the freedoms of another. And so, as you might have seen over the last few years, it took until 2020 for the bill to pass. Um, and I think maybe two or three prime ministers. Um, so yeah, it took a while, especially in light of heavy scrutiny by the House of Lords. But it's, I think, important that that scrutiny happened. It was just a shame that it took so long, because a lot of people came into harm's way in the kind of time frame it took for that legislation to pass. But in the midst of all that heavy scrutiny in the House of Lords, the Online Safety Act was also discussed in various standing committees in Parliament and third sector consultations with stakeholders of like the act. And considering it was made to protect young people, it was us. We were the stakeholders. And so I personally, along with lots and lots of other young people, were very involved in the consultation process to make sure that the bill was as accountable and wide as possible, so that once it was enacted, we weren't missing things, but we also took into account that the internet is always changing. And so you can't legislate for every possible instance. And so it's kind of a matter of balancing how specific you are to make sure people can't slip through the cracks, but also making sure that you're kind of leaving space for new developments, because with things like AI developing all the times, just in the last few months, there were massive deep fakes of lots of kind of young girls being spread. And at the time of the act being passed, that wasn't a thing. So you kind of have to leave it quite broad. Um, and so I was kind of heavily involved in that. Um, for me, the Online Safety Act was important because through my work as a digital champion, I witnessed firsthand just how significantly some platforms were failing to protect young people and everyone online. And so saw kind of a really massive gap in the government's efforts to hold big tech to an account in some of this context. Specifically, as a student at an all-girls school, the matter of body image and the impact of kind of the online world upon it is an issue very close to my heart. Having watched so many girls in my classes succumb to the pressures of disordered eating as a result of the horrifically unachievable standards set on the internet. Um, I personally saw social media companies as like significant perpetrators in the issue. Um, but more significantly, the politicians in power at the time who were refusing to do something about it when they were virtually the only ones who could kind of force their hands. Um, so in addition to the discussions I had with the government directly, I sought to work with the industries at hand. So um, TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and those kinds of people, to make sure that they were actually compliant with the Online Safety Act and kind of subsequent EU legislation that came to follow, so that once they were actually passed, companies would, abide by them and protect young people properly. Um, I think, regulation in the eyes of many is seen as red tape. It's like an inconvenience in their day, in like development of their apps or kind of making sure that everyone is using them all the time. However, for young people, a lack of regulation can be a life or death matter, as we've seen so many times, such as, Molly Russell in recent years. If platforms aren't made safe for young people, they're generally the ones that succumb to it the fastest, because there's lots of peer pressure in high school and everything else. And so if the government and companies don't act to make sure that they're safe, it's those people that suffer really, really heavily. Um, so yeah, if you could go on to the next slide, that would be great. So the internet, however, as I kind of even recently discussed, I was involved with the White House Women's Lead Initiative, which is about women in politics and women's involvement in peace efforts. I discussed how the internet transcends national boundaries, meaning the efforts of myself and my colleagues that I've just told you about, and those of the government are pretty much completely in vain if other countries don't follow suit. And so I've personally worked to try and drive supranational UN sort of efforts to actually make a difference and ensure that what we do in the UK actually does something. Because if someone in America is extorting someone online in the UK, as much as the UK might have our Online Safety Act, America doesn't. And so there's nothing you can do about it. As a result, since 2022, I've worked with a variety of organizations, mainly the UN and the EU Commission, to drive digital regulation and women and children's safety online. I first sort of encountered the UN last year. The week before my birthday, I visited the actual HQ, and then the day after, I got an invite to speak there, which was unrelated but cool. And it was with the representative of the Secretary General for Violence Against Children. And since then, I've worked on a variety of different UN initiatives, such as the Neural Network and the Global Digital Compact, to try and encourage other countries to follow the example of the UK and the EU to protect young people kind of cohesively, which has been, yeah, pretty cool, but it's a work in progress still. It can be also quite confusing with Brexit because technically we're not in the EU, but we're still kind of affected by EU matters. And so I recently did something called Eurodig, which is like a big European conference about internet regulation. And I was the only person from England, but and half of it was in German. But nevertheless, it's really important that we make sure that all the countries actually agree, which, yeah, Germany was not on side. They were like, yeah, it's all fine. We're fine. We're great. We're Germany. And I was like, yeah, but the internet's still a problem there. Anyway, the last thing I'd like to touch on quickly in the last kind of 2 minutes is the importance of AI and youth in addressing the Sustainable Development Goals. I've talked a little bit about kind of this concept called torchbearers for the SDGs, which is about getting young people and anyone who's really online to really advocate for sustainable development, be it poverty or women's rights. And I just want to kind of leave you with the idea that if we have these conversations about massive problems, as I'm sure you all do as optimists, with all of your work, it's so, so important. And I think seeing, as Denise told me about everything you guys do is really, really brilliant. And all of your kind of initiatives are so in line with kind of the ideas that the torchbearers and everything else at the UN and the UN Youth Envoy are aligned with. And so, yeah, I see such a convergence between what I've sort of done to involve technology in achieving kind of development and equality, and the kind of ways in which you guys go about it. So it seems really brilliant. And thank you so much for, yeah, having me speak. I hope it wasn't too jargony and that it was a little bit interesting. Yeah, I don't usually talk about myself, so it's weird.
Also a focus on ensuring safe access through increased investment into digital literacy among youth to ensure the long-run digital literacy potential.
I thought it was a picture.
That's the SDG. Is that the last slide? Yeah. We'll stop sharing then. Brilliant. You've no need to be embarrassed about talking about yourself, Cosima.
Absolutely not. I'm quite sure that that has engendered lots of questions. Cosima has kindly agreed to answer questions. So if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, please make yourself known. I'm not seeing any hands
Nikki,
go up.
Nikki's got her
Yeah,
hand.
yeah. Nikki, you were there first.
So firstly, I just want to absolutely applaud you for everything you've done, and also as a mother of two effectively teenagers, your work is just so fundamental to, especially as a parent, for the concerns that I have on a daily basis. But I have a couple of questions for you, if that's okay. First is actually one of communication. Yes, there's all the I guess all the online checks and how individuals need to behave in terms of the internet. And there's also your later work and everything you're doing on a political level. And I just wonder, for me, I feel if we're going to get students engaged, then it has to almost be generated through schools to get their attention in the first place. So I'm just wondering what you're doing directly with schools to basically bring awareness to all the causes that you're working in.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's really nice. And yeah, I think especially in terms of getting young people involved, it's so important that schools are kind of encouraging it for one, because I think a lot of the time, there's so much focus on your academics, which is brilliant, but at the same time, you're then kind of let into the real world and all these terrible problems are there. And I think a lot of young people feel almost disempowered that they get released into the real world at 18 and they haven't been made fully aware of all these problems that they might have wanted to do something about, a couple of years ago. I think with the internet especially or particularly, the digital leaders program, kind of what I've done to develop it is like a purely in schools initiative. So it provides that education that young people need to kind of want to be involved with these kinds of things. And Safe for Internet Day as well is kind of about engaging people while they're in school with kind of internet-based issues. And so that's kind of the direct ways that me or like my organization has kind of done that. But I think I'm hoping to, at least in the future, maybe like at university, kind of utilize social media itself more directly to kind of get that information out there. I think in the past, ChildNet as a whole has been skeptical because there's so much information out there and it's hard to get people to kind of find that specific stuff. But I think if you, I've personally worked on like kind of campaign strategy before for other things, and I'm looking to sort of utilize that to kind of focus on internet-based issues and get people aware of everything, kind of directly either with the UN, or kind of just myself, or maybe I'll find some friends to help me. But yeah, I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, I think getting into schools and getting your message out a bit more. I think that will help propel you because it's truly incredible. And then not to monopolize on questions, my second question is far more selfish. I'm a Neanderthal when it comes to technology. So I know you're aiming at, the younger generation, but how would I as a parent be able to look at, some of the checks that you were talking about in terms of
Yeah. So there's
protecting oneself?
on Instagram itself, there's like a help center, and there's a variety of like sort of guides on how to like strengthen your privacy settings. I mean, personally, I've kind of done it for like all of the staff at my school. They kind of pass me around their phones and I fix them. But you can kind of um find that there. We've kind of worked to make that a bit more accessible. It's sort of still a work in progress and not always the most willing, but that definitely has some really good information. I think ChildNet itself also has a variety of guides on really key issues. I know they published one recently on AI as itself, and also this thing called sextortion, which is a really growing issue online, which is when young people are targeted, and sort of pressure to send whatever kind of messages, and money is sort of held over them. And it's a really big kind of growing issue. And I know that they've published guidance on that. So there's ChildNet, there's Ofcom provide a bit of guidance as well, because when the Online Safety Act passed, they were delegated the kind of enforcement responsibility. And so they're publishing reports. And they've also got like something called their media literacy strategy, which is, I think, coming out maybe in September, which is designed to get people more aware of everything online because it's so complicated. And
Yeah.
even after 5 years, I don't understand it all. I kind of do my best, but it's always changing. And I think it's only really when you're really embroiled in that sector that you're like completely get it because you understand the sort of inner workings. But those are definitely good resources. And I can send to like Denise later as well, like a list of a couple things if that would help, just to like
That would be absolutely
simplify.
amazing. Thank you so much.
No
Really,
worries.
really impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have Liz's question on the chat. You have an amazing ability to influence big organizations. What is your key influencing technique, and what has been your proudest achievement so far?
Thank you. I think for me, it's about giving people proper examples of kind of, at least in a wider context. I think when you contextualize an issue with someone who's really been affected by a certain thing. So for me, the most direct example I have is the girls at my school, who've been so badly impacted by the internet. And, there's like 800 girls and they're all very close together and it's bad enough. But when you add the internet to that, it sort of catalyzes this big issue. And so I think in lots of discussions, I've referenced that. Um, but yeah, I think it's about talking to people, not as if they don't know everything, but just sort of adding to their knowledge. I've done a lot of work with sort of youth talent at like the BBC in terms of getting them aware of things and being safe online when they're kind of on TV all the time. And they're young people and they don't know everything because that's not the area they work in. But I think not being patronizing and not talking to people like they're stupid because they're not. They just don't know everything because no one can. And I think if you address it in a way that you're sort of just building on things rather than being like, you're stupid, you don't know anything, we've got to start fresh. It's not that because everyone has their sort of unique experience of things that they can bring to an issue like that. It's just bringing all of that together. And so I think, yeah, talking aware and being aware of people's experience is important. My sort of proudest achievement, I don't know. I think the first sort of thing I did with the UN was pretty cool. I was just 17 or just about to be 17, and I had just been to the big HQ and seen the big General Assembly. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. I'd like to do that one day. And then like the next day I was sitting in my hotel room and I was like, oh, this is that day. So that was quite cool. But that and maybe interviewing a minister last year, I went into like the big buildings in Whitehall and was talking to one of the digital ministers, and that was pretty cool because there were cameras everywhere and I was like on the monitor. It was quite cool.
Thank you. And a question from Jane. How on earth have you fitted all that real world work in with your schoolwork?
Um, I mean, it's been challenging at times to say. I think my school is quite like academically intense at times. Especially like the subjects I took. I didn't make it easy for myself. But I think for me, sort of this was like almost like a release because it was really nice to have something where I had the information and I didn't have to like struggle to understand things. Whereas school, it's always kind of like grappling to the top, if that makes sense. And so it was almost like my free time was spent doing this, but it was actually quite relaxing. It can be scary at times, but I think using my brain for something useful, like it was rewarding. And so it didn't really matter if it took up like my evenings or whatever. But yeah, it was definitely challenging at times. So my teachers would be like, where are you going if you're taking a day off? And I'd be like, Instagram. But yeah, it was interesting. I think I wouldn't change it because it made at least sixth form much more entertaining.
So now a question from Lisa Davis.
Well, I'd like to applaud you for what you've done. I think you're absolutely fabulous and you need to really keep going and push. I was just wondering, when you do go to government, Do they push you away? Do they bring you in? Do they help you? What do they do?
The government.
Yes.
I think a lot of the time they're quite willing to listen to me because I kind of, I don't know, I've had interesting experiences. If I've gone with people who were potentially from a different background, they've not been as willing to listen. I
Right.
think because maybe my school or the way I talk, I don't know. It's kind of, you don't realize it, but whatever. I think they've been a bit more willing to listen, especially the kind of the last government. But also I think when you're coming from a place of like you're their future voters and you're the people using these services, they kind of have no choice but to listen. But everyone, the MPs particularly that I've spoken with over the years have all been really nice and
Right.
willing to listen. There's a particular person called Luke Evans, and he's very affiliated with kind of holding companies to account. He had this initiative last year, which was about stopping big brands from editing their like pictures online, like Zara, H&M. Um, and so he's been very supportive of that. Um, but yeah, I think if you're coming at an angle that you're just trying to help them, then they're much more willing to listen. Whereas if you're on the offense, then it's a bit harder. Um, but yeah, it's been interesting. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what it will be like now. I've known a set of people for like the past sort of 4 years in that context, and now they're all gone really. And so I'm kind of looking to see who else is kind of interested and looking forward to seeing what the government will actually do because they passed the Online Safety Act, but there's a lot more to kind of go. And so I'm kind of interested to see what the future holds on that front.
I wondered, it's a biggie, if you could write to number 10 and ask them if somehow you could pull it all together and do something for them
Yeah,
with
I
all
mean,
your experience.
if they would listen, maybe. I mean, my
Well,
mum
they're listening at
used
the
to know
moment.
here, so maybe I can text and or email and be like, "Hi, you might remember
Have a go.
that." I don't know.
And what can optimists do? What can we do to help all of this and to help young people? What can we do? Because we have Siams in North Yorkshire, that's where I'm from. And we're having leaflets for grandparents and things to understand and help younger people and on the internet. But what can we do to help push your
Um,
campaigns forward and also to get out there about safety online for children?
yeah, I mean, I appreciate any help. I think kind of anything maybe pushing out like any resources that I think are useful just to kind of get out the message to people, not necessarily on my account, but just advocating for kind of online safety is really important. And I think any maybe people you may think would be willing to listen, maybe letting me know who they are or letting them know who I am would be really helpful. Because I know people within my space, but kind of breaking out of that can be hard, especially when you're young.
But
um,
it's how can you pull everything you've done together? I mean, you're talking about Snapchat and Instagram and things. How can you pull it all together in one bag? Put it out there to show us
yeah.
all what we're supposed to be doing to help people and how
I
people
mean,
help
I'd love
themselves.
to start my own sort of organization where it's kind of all in one place. I think maybe I'm waiting to see if I get into uni, but maybe when I'm there, I have very little lecture hours, so I'll have some time and I'd quite like to put everything in one place myself. I think from all the different aspects that I've sort of worked in, that might be useful to people, but I'll have to
All
see.
right. What do you want to study at university?
Politics.
Oh, of course, yes, I've just seen it. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh well, if you get
Uh,
into that, you can really go for it, can't you?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Lisa.
Thank
Let's
you for
move
that.
on because others have their hands up. So, Pat, you've had your hand up for a while.
Hey, I think I would like to say how wonderful you are. Actually, that's what I will say to begin with. But tell me, who is your guru? You
Um,
started at the age of 13. So who is leading you and who is your guru?
I think there's been a variety of people. I know when I was going through my GCSEs, it was a really hard time. There was so much to do, and I had missed a year of school before because I wasn't well. And so I listened to a lot of what Jamila Jamil said, about sort of like it's okay to fail, it's okay to try and it go wrong. And that sort of let me do a lot of things that I was previously scared to do. I think like walking into the rooms I walk into, it's usually all kind of old men that it can be kind of scary. And so I think listening to people like that has been helpful in just like ignoring the fact that it's actually quite scary and just going for it. Um, I think seeing what my mum has done over the years as well has been pretty cool. She's a barrister, and seeing her like do all of that as like a woman on her own, um, in a very like male dominated world has been pretty cool. I kind of had thoughts about maybe being a lawyer for a little bit, but I don't really like dead bodies, so I kind of veered away from that. But that's been pretty cool. And also the women at my school, because it's all girls, the staff is very female dominated and the management is too. And seeing them do everything and um sort of almost like rule the school, like little baby, a cabinet in like, parliament has been really shown you that you can do it too, because all you ever hear is that they're crazily busy, but they still manage to do it all. And I think modeling yourself after that has been interesting and very valuable. So yeah, it's a mix of people.
It makes sense. It does make sense. When you get to UCL, I'll introduce you to another young person who is a seroptomist, studying medicine. So you probably
Oh
can
wow,
tap
thank
in.
you.
She's 19. So that's
Oh,
good.
cool.
That's what networking's all about. Lindsay, can I invite you to ask your question?
My question's a comment really is absolutely amazing. You've done some amazing work so far, and I can see you going way into the sky. I would like you to go way into the sky as a seroptomist. So when are you joining? Because we need young women like you at Seropsis International Great Britain and Ireland, but also at SI, and I'm sure Pat would nod her head with that as well. We've got young women that we're trying to drive the organisation forward with, and we need young women like you. So if you've got 6 friends or 7 friends that are as passionate about things as you are, then talk to the nearest club. I'm not sure which the nearest club is to where you live, but talk to them about
Probably ours.
you, right, brilliant. Talk to them about becoming a Seroptimus Club in your own right, and they will mentor you and they will help you. But I think you need to start a new club of your own with some friends. You only need 8 friends, Cosima, and I'm sure you've got loads of those that would like to come along with you, and you could just do your passion. And I'd like to see you at conference. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
Correct. Yeah. Be nice.
Thank you. Helen, you've had your hand up for a while. I think this will have to be the last one. Helen, you're on mute, my dear.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, fantastic, as everybody else has said. You've done amazing stuff, and I know you're going to do amazing stuff in future. It's really gratifying to me. In my professional life, I was a librarian, and I started out when the internet got invented, teaching people how to use it, and got involved in helping parents and grandparents and anybody who was involved in understanding the safety implications and what they should be doing to help children. So it's fantastic to hear you've achieved as much as you have and you are continuing to work on it. So absolutely wonderful. Just one quickish question, but it might be a biggie. So if it is, just tell me the quick answer. You talked about working with the various platforms that were failing to protect children, and you mentioned TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. Are there any platforms out there that are being resistant to making changes to make life safe for children online?
Thank you. And that's a really interesting question. I think when they're spoken to directly by someone like me, I think they, at least on the face of it, are pretty willing to do something. I think some platforms have been slower than others because the issue has been there for a very long time. And it's only really in the past sort of, well, for Snapchat, like this month,
Yeah.
that something has been done. And so I understand that kind of development takes time, but some of them have been kind of lagging behind. I think Meta has been really willing. Sometimes they've gone a bit wrong in terms of how, but they've always sort of been open to feedback. I did
Right.
2-year-long circuits of consultation with them when I was, I think, 13 and 14, and they were always very receptive. TikTok, I think they do have something in the US where they sort of talk to young people and such, but they're a bit more closed off. I don't know if that's sort of like an infrastructure thing, but um, I think the most receptive has definitely been Meta as a whole, and they've definitely it put together the most sort of responses to that in terms of the features that they've added and things like that. And Snap have definitely been quite slow.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, there are a couple of people who have put questions on the chat, but we're kind of running out of time, and I don't want to wear Cosima out. I would now like to hand over to Sarah for her vote of thanks. Sarah.
Right, Cosima, you are the most impressive young lady. I was very interested in the subject anyway, but I had absolutely no idea that we were going to be addressed by somebody who started their career, I suppose you would call it, at such a tender age. So all credit to you and all strength to you going forward. As you said, your ideals do align with our aims and so on with the UN and everything. And so, as you were just told, I think you would fit into Sir Optimism very well. But aside from that, we can only wish you the greatest amount of success at university and in your career going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if there are quite a few of us here who are expecting to see something of you in the future. I don't know whether you have any ambitions to be a politician, but you certainly sound like you might be going in that direction. So all we can do is to thank you very much indeed for spending time with us tonight and to wish you all the very best.
Thanks so much, and thanks for listening. Yeah, hopefully I'll do something. I'm kind of
sure
figuring it out,
I'm
but
sure you will. So thank you very much indeed.
So the first thing we'll do is, in the time-honoured way, we'll show our thanks. We tend to do this rather than that. So if we can all do that to thank Cosima ever so much. And Jane, I'm sure you want to get a screenshot of all our attendees listening intently. Those who don't want their picture as part of this, please do turn your video off now. Those who would like to be part of the picture, please turn your cameras on so that we can see you. So Jane, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, just do the hand thing again. It's cool. There we go. Thank you. Wow. My brain is going, I don't know, about 100 miles an hour at the moment, trying to take in everything that Cosima said. So thank you. Thank you so much. On to our guests, you've been sent information about a charity that Cosima is supporting. So if you do feel like making a donation, Cosima, do you want to tell us about the charity you're supporting?
Yeah, so the charity is called Live Luke's Dreams. A family friend of ours, her son Luke died a few years ago of leukemia. And so the charity works to support the hospital that treated him, which is Barnet, like the cancer wing, pediatric cancer wing at Barnet Hospital, to support the patients there. There's lots of charities I could have thought of, but I think their work is really important, and lots of the other ones have lots of donors. So yeah, Luke's Dreams, it's a very small charity, so anything, yeah, it would be very much appreciated, but obviously there's like no pressure to donate. But thank you.
Thank you. And if our club will be making a donation, but obviously if any members want to make an additional donation, they can do it through the usual bank transfer. So I'm going to stop recording now.